Hello, welcome to Tarot for Our Times. This is Sarah, your medium on the go. And I'm doing this kind of late on Tuesday the 20th, and you'll see it early in the morning on Wednesday the 21st. A number of months ago, I did, I can't remember, it was maybe back in I think it was back in the last spring. I did a video called Courage is Contagious. And that's pretty much about standing up to bullies and bully regimes. So I want to go back and revisit that. I was inspired by Dr. Lena Rodriguez when she just happened to say that in one of her videos. It kind of came out at the end, and it just resonated so much with me. Now, I saw two movies tonight on Turner Classic that theme is quite apparent, and they're both from the 1950s, and probably two of the best movies of that kind. And the first one was A Face in the Crowd, made in 1957 with Andy Griffith, Patricia Neal, Walter Matthau, really, really good cast. And the second one, there's quite it's a very intense double feature. The second one was on the Waterfront, made 1954 with Marlon Brando, Eva Marie Saint, and Lee J. Cobb is the villain. Now, I want these movies talk about people being duped and the massive crowds. So with the first movie, Facing the Crowd, is the viewing public, and I've always said that movie was prophetic in what we would be going through today. And very briefly, it's about a woman in Arkansas, Patricia Neal, who finds this and decides to go in the jail and interview people. And so she finds this guy that she dubs as Lonesome Rhodes, who has a guitar and has some talent, and she puts him on their radio show, and he really catches on with the public. He has charisma, but he's an alcoholic. That never changes, actually. It just becomes a highly functioning alcoholic. And at any rate, he really has a handle on the on the viewing public, and he's going to be used by some right-wing politics to further their agenda. Sound familiar? He's very kind of like a hillbilly Trump, and this movie they've called it very prophetic for what we're going through today. And the one who discovered him brings him down. And in the second one, on the Waterfront, 1954, we have it takes, I think it's in New Jersey. I think it's like Hoboken or Bayonne, New Jersey. And it's about longshoremen and the crookedness of the longshoremen union. And Marlon Brando plays an ex-prize fighter who, I think he took a dive or something like that, and is no longer a fighter, but he's a longshoreman. And the villain is the Lee J. Cobb character, who plays John Friendly, who, if people decide to go against him, and they're just absolutely robbing these guys blind. Sound familiar? And basically anybody who tries to rat them up ends up being unalived, and that's how the movie begins, as someone thrown off a roof. And the Marlon Brando of Terry Malloy character has kind of set it up, but he was given false information as to what was going to happen. So there's this big, stupid, macho code of honor of like, thou shalt not rat anybody out, even if it's your union president and his goon squad who's robbing you blind. So in the end, after a lot of pressure and more people dying, Terry Malloy testifies before a hearing, and he rats out the union leader, and the guys all turn against him, and there's a big fight, and he's all bloodied up. And when those guys are down at the docks getting their shift, he has to stand up. I mean, he's just they. I was going to post the picture, but I think it's that I didn't want to take a chance on YouTube, like censoring it, because it's makeup, but he looked just awful, like beat to a pulp, and he staggers to the place where the guys are standing, and they finally realize that yes, he has the courage of their convictions, and so the Johnny Friendly character is telling the foreman, if he goes there, you're not these people can't work. But what happens is that he walks up, and all of the guys go in defying the union boss, and there's nothing he can do. Well, he's going to be going to prison anyway. So there's nothing that he can do, but it really took the act of that one person to turn them around. So I feel as though this is both of these, it's a very timely thing. And actually, both of them were directed by Elia Kazan. And this was a period during the Red Scare, and HUAC, the House Un-American Committee, wanted to get everybody in Hollywood blacklisted, and there were a lot of people that refused to name names, but Kazan did, which is the big irony that somehow he was bullied into it, but that's a whole other topic, but I always found it kind of ironic. So we're dealing with a couple of narcissistic and anti-heroes, and for those of you who love the Andy Griffith Show, he's quite a different character. And I always call that, since it was before the TV shows, I always say, you're not in Mayberry yet movie. So I highly, highly recommend people see these. I just want to, it's very interesting because the mobs and crowds of people in both of them are really up for leaders that completely mislead them or intimidate them into not standing up for each other. And I did have to make notes to make sure yes, the most recent example of that is in current events and it may not seem like a big, but it is kind of a big one, is the Michael Cohen thing. Now, a few people on YouTube were kind of criticizing Midas Touch because they had given him a show, Mea Culpa, I think it was, that got him a lot of viewers, and it plugged his book and yada, yada, yada. And so he kind of turned on he's just a real smarmy, icky kind of person. He turned on them, and now he's groveling back, trying to get back in with Kanks and all this stuff. So, it Midas touched it. They immediately dropped his show off of YouTube. They disassociated with him, and I thought, that takes courage, and it's kind of rare that when people make a mistake, that we all make mistakes, and we all misjudge. Even we psychics, we misjudge people. But the important thing is that if you turn right around and say, okay, I'm going to correct it, and you just correct it, you dump the person and move on. So I talk about all of this because I believe what these two movies do is that if there are, in this case, it's probably going to take more than one person. But if enough people show some courage, and we see that in the people in Minnesota, also Wisconsin, in their last election, that Minnesota are doing this, it does catch on. And the thing is that keeping it peaceful also catches on, although they already have their agent provocateur out there to try to goad people into fighting. But the people in Minneapolis have really been keeping their. They must have very good leadership there on their end of it. So I also believe that in seeing these things being played out on the national and the world stage, like the people in Iran protest, that's death to do that. I think what it shows us is that, since I'm trying to talk about our own personal transformation, is when we see this on a national level with these larger than life douchebags, actually, it may give people courage to do that in their personal lives. Like people getting out of abusive relationships, or maybe having to divorce their toxic parents. And the thing about, even though the word is never mentioned in A Face in the Crowd, Marcia, until she does her hot mic, letting the world hear what, when he goes, "Good night, you suckers," you know, he doesn't say assholes, but that's pretty much what he's saying, is that when she has the courage to turn up the sun, that she had an incredibly codependent relationship. And even though she did that, this is interesting psychologically, the Walter Matthau character, who's I love the Southern gentleman writer who's seen through this guy the whole time, he says, "I don't believe you. You have to take the action in telling him that you did the hot mic on him." And he takes her to the place where he's having this banquet that no one shows up. So it's not just one thing. There's got to be follow-ups. And I would say this movie, it's not only about the relationship with the public that turns on 20-story elevator ride down, and he's finished because the switchboards get flooded. So in the space of just a minute that it takes him, his career is over and he doesn't know it. She has to go to the place where he's having his victory banquet, where no one shows up, to admit to him that she was the one that, and that's her transformation. So you see that not only with the vast public turning against this narcissistic guy, you see that in her own interpersonal life, she's been having an affair with him. She's finally lets him go. And it's not easy. What an acting job. It's not easy. You can see what she's going through, and it is quite profound. So I see that maybe people doing that in their personal lives. So in the death card, this is a death card thing. And of course, there's a bit of the moon and the introspection. But it's like letting go of toxic people and bullies in your life. And that could be the king. Long live the king. It could be the religious figure, because people may have to, the evangelicals, they can still believe in God and Jesus, but maybe in a different way, and not in the trans people and gays and Jews and people and immigrants are all going to go to hell, but maybe in what these entities really taught, and just go to another church. So there's a whole lot with that. So I decided I'm going to just keep this down to a couple of decks tonight. It's just like I get the spiritual gang says, "Nah, why don't we will leave the before and after tarot and just use the simple basic variations on the traditional rider weight things." So, but we're going to do and it gives me more room to work too. Okay, so what I want to see is, what is it going to take? And what are we going to do next to, if we pressure the leaders to turn, because this is a twofold thing with being bullied. we have the public who is actually turning on this regime faster than the politicians have to catch up. They have to catch up. I mean, how dense can they be? And so what is it going to do? And then in that respect, maybe we take a look at our own lives and see what we don't need anymore. And that's where the shift comes. That is where the shift comes. So let's get this reading going here. Okay, so so where we are at now with this whole craziness, as far as our national and our personal bullies go. Oh, temperance. This is very important. This is having the balance between our material and spiritual and our creative life too. I think a message of this card too is because when I've done readings with my fellow recovering or trying to recover people, is like when temperance comes in, this also represents sobriety. So what I think the message of this card is, not only do you need to have that balance, but we're in a time of history. If you have any substance abuse or gambling issues, you really have to start to address that, because you cannot I had learned that the hard way. You cannot do the therapy and all this other work if you've got that monkey on your back. And I think it's important to point out that the Lonesome Rhodes character was an alcoholic. Now, he could be sober when he had to be on the air, and he turned out to be a pretty astute businessman. But in the end, when it's falling apart, you see he was drunk when he went on to do the show, but he could always had that ability to be lucid and sober. And then that can be more harmful. So, and also the Marcia character being majorly codependent. Okay, so then we have this crossed with the energy of the Three of Swords in reverse, which is about getting rid of the betrayals. Getting rid of the betrayal and weathering through the storm and seeing. I see this as, when this is upright, often you don't see it. Well, you do sometimes, but when this is in reverse, in order to get rid of it and heal it, you have to see it. And so with this being in reverse, you see it. Okay. So the underlying stuff we've got going on here with this being bullied is big burden. It's a big burden to carry. I would say since a year ago, because when I record this is a year ago today, when when he got sworn in and set the muskrat and his little nut boys, sick them on the government. It was a burden. And it's, not only a burden of, we've got to deal with, we can't afford anything and all this kind of thing, but there's a lot of emotional stuff, burdens with this too, because you wake up and say, I wonder what he's done today. So we've been burdened with this since before he took office, but it really began, the Tower, thank God, in reverse. Okay. So, we've been dealing with our mini crises along with this. Maybe they're not they don't quite finish us off, but there's kind of like no rebuilding. But we go through all of these little tower episodes with not being able to pay this bill and, or not being able to get this treatment because of the cuts that were made. And so this is actually part of the burden. But see, these things actually lead up to saying, I can't take it anymore, so screw them. Okay, good thing this is a little bit in the future, and this is in reverse. This is saying, we've been stabbed in the back, and part of the healing process is to stand up to the bullies. And you know what? We, the people, seem to be doing that before the people in government. And I know sometimes I get a little offset with Jennifer and Angie, trashing a lot of the Democrats, but they're right. They're capitulating. We've got to get, Jeffrey's got to either get with the program or get gone. Schumer's got to go. He's been in there for over 30 years now, and he's in the old school way of thinking. He's got to go. So, but when this starts to happen, then the healing begins. And the healing begins because not only have we been stabbed in the back by the regime, but by people, if we're Democrats, in our own party. And we have to, the people in New York, let them know we want a progressive, very progressive person that goes against the establishment. And that's the message. And if they don't pick up on that, then they're going to be out. I really think that maybe saying these guys are not acceptable, and with the primary season coming up, and you get the more progressive, they could be younger, but they could be Bernie Sanders too. Okay, so in opposition of this is the Hanged Man in reverse. So we've got to do our bit. It kind of goes with it's kind of a companion with the Death card. What we've got to do is we've got to start seeing things from a different point of view. And part of that is to not have the knee-jerk reaction to democratic socialism. It's not Venezuela. It's not Cuba. It's not China. It's Norway and Sweden. I mean, but try to tell people that it's, Okay, so. Alrighty, so where are we at on the conscious level? I think everybody's just so overwhelmed, but that's a trap that bullies like to overwhelm you. Okay, so let's see what we have on the conscious level. I think he's getting ready to spring into action, and a lot of this is in communication. And the swords in the more modern interpretation can represent the internet. So I think what it is not only being ready to, the platforms like YouTube and these others, and, maybe TikTok to a certain extent, and the others except for the muskrat trashing of Twitter, but getting ready to send a new message, but to be smart about it, because he is ready to spring into action, and they do represent new beginnings, but he's also thinking it through before he communicates. So I think this is where we are at. Now, some people may think of it as a holding position. I think of no, it's kind of not maybe buy, even on the internet, not buying into all the stuff they want us to do to, try to shut it down. Subconscious level is, and I think that this, people are struggling with this. Subconscious level is that we walked away from the bully a lot sooner than we realized it. So, but maybe not quite, and I'm going to say with a lot of Republicans, that this would be more on the subconscious level of the Republicans, but maybe not openly expressing it, but walking away. So that's kind of interesting. So in the past, we had, here we go again. In the past, I would say maybe let's go back to when he took office. we were really wounded. Now in order to stand up to bullies, you've got to do some healing work, and that kind of goes with if you have issues with alcohol, drugs, gambling, shopping, whatever. You're not going to be useful until you address that stuff. Okay. And I know that with COVID, I'm sure that a lot of people sat at home and drank and, did drugs, and maybe they crossed over the line into addiction or came close enough to rethink, so that maybe they're, in the past, that some healing work has begun in preparation to saying, well, we've got to get into healing mode before we can do our resistance. And okay, so then moving into the present is Cups in reverse. I would say the grief and the emotion of losing, even if it's done in privately, but it's a release. It's like I look at the cups in reverse, Ace of Cups in reverse, as having that good cry that is needed to let it out. And if you do it privately or whatever way makes you comfortable, to release the negative feelings. And in that way, when that happens, you are getting ready to, it's kind of like, hitting bottom emotionally about where all of this is at. And so we can clear the decks and move on. So let's see what we have here, going a little bit into the future. Yeah, I'm going to look at this as this is the government and say and getting involved and starting to pick better leaders. Sometimes it's simple. And picking the leaders like the older but wiser Bernie Sanders, the younger ones like AOC, Jasmine Crockett, and I believe our Summer Lee in in the Pittsburgh area is coming into her own with that, but she's got some good teachers there. Okay, so moving a little bit more into the future is I would say this is about maybe recruiting people, and it's not like you're going to convince your MAGA drunken uncle who's who drank the Kool-Aid, but to maybe talk to some people that aren't involved, that are on the fence, and telling them it's to their personal advantage, because I'm sure people have lost jobs, they haven't gotten the medical care, who couldn't give a shit about politics, but maybe saying, do you realize that this is affecting your life? The tariffs is why you can't get a new car and you've got to drive that old piece of junk. I mean, but doing it, he's being very reasonable. Okay, so now we get to the rest of the word, because this is like the whole world is watching. They're saying, what the hell is going on with these Yanks that they are not standing up to the bullies? The bullies, we got to stand up. And it's not so much of us. I'm beginning to think it's more of the people and convincing the people in government. Maybe with us it's more on that we can say, like, I can relate to maybe some of these Republicans like Ms. Lindsay, who God only knows what he's got on this one, I'm telling you. Maybe people like that who, if they can't take the heat of crossing him, maybe they just need to step down. But like someone like Miss Lindsay, who just said the most awful things about him, and then now they're golfing buds, that kind of a thing. So taking a look and seeing what I think that's probably the blackmail scenario. So those that cannot face having to have, and maybe you don't blame them, of having that sort of thing out, that maybe the best thing is to step down and let somebody else come in, because the Republicans are going to really be the ones that are going to need to do this too, just because in Watergate, you had your Senator Weicker and Inouye, all these Republicans, that Sam Ervin, I don't know if he was a Southern Democrat or Republican, but these people that were conservatives, they stood up to Nixon. And John Dean, they had which meant John Dean going to prison, but they had the courage to stand up in those Senate hearings and either question the hard questions or testify, like John Dean said. Okay, so that's the model you want to follow. Okay, so how we see ourselves in this whole thing is, again, the tower. It's just like every day it's one little crisis after another. It's like not enough that's going to bring the whole, nation down, but it's all of these things adding up. And so we're seeing ourselves in consistent crisis. I always think of the tower upright as, okay, you've had the big destruction, you've learned your lesson, you rebuild from the ashes. In the tower reversed, it's like you have all of these little crises, and this is what I would call the diversion from the Epstein files, like one after another. No lesson is learned from those people, perpetuating them. So we just observe these. So we're seeing ourselves like in one crisis after another for a whole year. It's exhausting. So that's how we see ourselves enduring these diversions. So the rest of the world seeing us is, not only are they not moving forward until this is addressed, but now we can't move forward because he wants Greenland, for God's sake. So here we go. So this is what's going on, and it's important to realize that as the world sees us this way, this is an opportunity to learn that the government we have now is preventing a lot of us from moving forward. Like, we don't have the money to do it, all this sort of thing, or we are not healthy enough to do it because of them. Well, I think we've got the worst health system in the industrialized world, and there's no excuse for it. Absolutely no excuse. So I'm going to take these guys here, the glow-in-the-dark cards, and try to come to a conclusion of when are we going to have our face in the... I've always said the face in the crowd moment, when she messes with the mics, it's not happening with one thing. It's a series of a bunch of them that will lead up to, it's death by 1,000 paper cuts, that kind of a stuff. So you need a lot of Marshes out there. And also in, the deciding point in the Waterfront, where he does stand up to the guy, not only to testify, but to fight him and get himself all bloodied up to lead the guys and get them enlightened. And on the Waterfront, in that movie, there's a lot of involved plot stuff that goes up, that because he's not doing it, because in the beginning when he witnesses it, I don't know what's going on, that kind of a thing. So the whole movie builds up to, it's going to take him a lot more courage to stand up to these union leader dickheads than it did for him to get into the ring and fight. And that, is the big lesson. So let's see So our little conclusion reading about what this is. Okay, so we have, here we go again, completely new deck shuffled. There's going to be a lot of talking and negotiating. I would say that movies often dramatize the little thing. They make the little things we need to do larger than life, although that can happen. So I think that the whole thing of getting people on board and, convincing them that this is not the way to live, it will lead up, it will lead up to the big moment. But I think that what this is saying, you have to start in a small way. So let's see what the energy with that is. The Page of Pentacles, which is, maybe considering thing like readjusting our finances, trimming back. I know I'm switching from Verizon to AT&T to save a ton of money on internet and phone and all that sort of thing. So finding a way, being creative with the finances so we don't get so depressed and bogged down in that it makes us immobile. And I think sometimes it's a bullying tactic to do things like, tariffs, and you can't afford this, that, and the other thing. But maybe it's tough because he's reevaluating what he values. So a part of this transformation and reconsidering this is considering what's really important that we spend our money on. What's so important is I'm wearing this sweater from like 20 years ago. You know what I mean? Or maybe more like 30 years ago. Do we don't need to buy whole new wardrobes and that kind of thing. So let's see. Moving along here, we have, okay. Interesting. Now that we have the Five of Swords in reverse, and that's really, I would say that is confronting the bully and then walking away. So, and when it's upright, I think it's more like walking away, but I see it in reverse as confrontation. It may be taking those swords away. Okay, so moving along here. Making small strategies to build up to the big thing. So it's like be smart about it. Try to be smart about it. And here we have her is Mother Russia. I think the whole thing is to be very clear on the Russian involvement. And don't forget, Russia is the big bully with Ukraine. So it's about confronting the big bully and doing whatever little you can do. Sometimes when you help the little guy from being bullied or the other person from being bullied, that's transformational too. So whether it's sending stuff to your, donating money or taking your old clothes to the Ukrainian church in your neighborhood so they can send it over to people there that are fighting and need stuff. So remember that the big villain, because this is saying is Mother Russia is bullying the bully. So that's a big lesson, because sometimes the big bullies are real cowards, and you can see when there's a bigger bully, they can be taken down. So the Russia thing is very important. That didn't come up. And decisions to be made, but the message of this is don't overthink it. Open up your heart, take off the blindfold, because it goes a bit with Temperance about using your intuitive and your logical sides of the brain. And then we have here, the Moon. And realizing you can learn a lot from these sickos, really. Whether they're Trump has been called the lonesome roads of today, the rich white boy version as opposed to the poor white version. There's maybe I'll find it and I'll link it in the description. There's a very good talk about how Andy Griffith, when I would say it was a number of years, it might have been the post Mayberry days, where he really, and Trump wasn't really in the picture except, gypping people in real estate. But he really predicted there could be someone like that comes along, and we have to be very aware of that, because the actor was not like that guy at all. He was a very liberal, giving kind of a person. So what I'm saying is really seeing these toxic people for who they are, and that they are incredibly wounded. And I would say when I see the moon in reverse, oftentimes, so they can't go any further than this. Like in the upright, they're going, they're making the journey to the pillars. But these people are so damaged. It's like the sociopathic serial killer. Like, they may not be that. Who knows? Or they may not be that. Then I'm saying this all for entertainment purposes only. But they may be beyond. The damage has been so severe that all you can do is keep them from the rest of society, do some behavior modification, and it's never going to get any better than that. So you have to realize that these people are beyond redemption. They're really, really... and I would say both those characters, Lee J. Cobb and the Andy Griffith characters in those movies, the damage was done very early on, and there's just no redemption at all. And then we have here, I think this is a perfect conclusion, because in the end, if we start, and it's not easy. It's like the Marcia character did that, but one of my old therapists back in Seattle used to call, you do that, but you feel the afterburn. It's like you feel, oh my God, what did I just do? Even though I know this is right, there's something kind of holding, and that's kind of how she did it until her Southern gentleman friend told her, no, you've got to take a bigger action and really face him now. And when you do that, and she was freaking out the whole time, when you do that, that's when you have a major victory. I would say this is also the card for the big final scene on the waterfront, where he's all bloodied. He walks up that gangplank to load the ship, and when they see that he can do it, they all follow suit. So then you have the wands of victory, like saying, once you do that and get up on that horse after it's thrown you off, the others will follow. And I would say it's not only revolutionary for the people, but it's also a it's your individual revolution. So, it's all about, breathing and meditating and all that stuff is important, but there's a lot more to it than that. For spiritual transformation, it's also about having the courage to stand up to the bullies, because I think what both of these movies illustrate is courage is contagious. And I would say, as we see the courage of the people in Minnesota, and believe me, I'm afraid to say there are going to be other places, because ICE Gestapo isn't done with their little killing thing. Now, those are people that I would say the vast majority of them are, because they are the big group of bullies, is that they're also maybe damaged beyond repair. I'd like to think maybe not all of them, but I'm afraid the vast majority of them are. So it's very important to see that, because as you see these people showing courage doing that may be standing up to your own bullies, or having to let people go from your life, is not going to be it's going to, not that it's easy, but you'll feel as though it's more doable. So, courage is contagious. I think that's something that it's a good mantra to have. If you're going to do mantras, that's a good mantra to have. So with that, I will say bye-bye for now.